So the third part of the Bhagavad Gita deals essentially with Prakriti and how to become free from it. So the Bhagavad Gita can broadly be divided into three types, three parts. The first part of the Bhagavad Gita, that is chapters 1 to 6, deal essentially with the individual soul. The next 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, 7 to 12, deal with the subject of God, Bhagavan, Krishna. The third part of the Bhagavad Gita, which goes from 13 to 18, is essentially about Prakriti and how one can become free from Prakriti. So the job of the individual soul is to become free from Prakriti and reunite with God. And the third part of the Bhagavad Gita essentially deals with Prakriti. And hence, it also deals with the three gunas. Because, as I pointed out last time, Prakriti essentially consists of the three gunas. Now, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has described the three gunas as I've discussed them last time. And these three gunas are present in everybody. No one is free from any one of these three gunas. No one is purely tamasic, no one is purely rajasic, and no one is purely sattvic. And Bhagavad Gita says that sattva, rajas, tamas, the three gunas, are constantly battling it out within yourself. Sometimes sattva is predominant, sometimes rajas is predominant, sometimes tamas is predominant. And as I explained to you last time, this is all natural. So since it is natural, one should not be concerned with the three gunas. And ideally, one should aspire to transcend these three gunas and become what we call as gun atita. So to become gun atita, one has to be engaged entirely in devotion to God. Mam chayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sa gunan samatityetan brahma bhuya kalpate. That one who is absorbed in God without any deviation, without any interruption, such a person, bhakti yogena sevate, full of love and devotion, who is serving God without any deviation or distraction, such a person transcends the three gunas. So that is the purpose, that is the goal. Nevertheless, it is important to know the three gunas because, as I've pointed out to you, the three gunas serve their function. Tamaguna helps you to rest and sleep at night, which is a very important function. Science is only beginning to understand how important sleep is. Rajaguna is the guna of activity. And that's how we engage in activity through the day. And Sattva Guna is that guna which brings about tranquility, serenity, which brings about harmony, which brings about an understanding of unity of creation. For those who have transcended the gunas, it doesn't matter what guna is present. Prakasham cha pravrittim cha mohameva cha pandava is indifferent whether sattvagun is present, rajagun is present, or tamagun is present. But for the rest of us, it is important to encourage sattvagun, because when one is in sattvagun, one is in tranquility, one is in serenity, one is in harmony, one sees the unity of creation, and one can then, in sattvagun, have a better chance of becoming gunatit. One can then have a better chance of transcending the gunas. And thus, Krishna explains through the Bhagavad Gita the importance of engaging in activities in Sattvagun. So, in this section of our discussion, I am going to explain to you what Krishna says in the rest of the third section of the Bhagavad Gita. Of course, for those who identify with the gunas, one has many different characteristics. Those who identify with the gunas and are predominantly sattvic, these are the devas. Those who identify largely with rajaguna and are predominantly in rajaguna and identify with it, these people are essentially asuras. Whereas those who are primarily largely in tamaguna and who also identify with it, such people are rakshasas. I explained to you last time that the body undergoes many cycles physiologically. And these physiological cycles, which take place within your body, which are part of Prakriti, also place you in a conducive manner to experience Sattvagun, Rajagun, and Tamagun. So those who get up early in the morning, because they sleep early in the evening, those who sleep at sunset rise 2 hours before sunrise. And these who rise before sunrise, they are in a sattvic mood. That is a time for prayer, a time for contemplation, a time for realizing one's unity with the rest of the universe, which is all one. And then as one goes through the day, one is in Rajaguna. So one engages in activity. But because for those whose moods have been set by Sattvagun in the early hours of the morning, these individuals, they will find that they are able to perform even their activity with a strong streak of Sattvagun, and how we will understand very shortly. Whereas those who are getting up late in the morning, those who sleep late in the night, as I pointed out last time, Raat Ka Raja, these engage in all kinds of activities that get ascendancy in the night. The taking of intoxicants, alcohol, of engaging in all kinds of pursuits which are tamasic. Therefore, it is important for us to remain as far as possible with a strong component of Sattvagun, because these help us to remain and aspire to be spiritually situated. So, in the 17th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is asked by Arjuna, what happens to a person who worships according to his own whim and fancy, one who acts according to his own imagination in worship? Is he in Sattvagun? Is he in Rajagun? Is he in Tamagun? Of course, one who is situated in Sattvagun and who follows the Shastra is the highest situated individual. And he transcends all the gunas and becomes absorbed in God by remembering Him and forgetting oneself. But those who do not take guidance of the Shastra, those who act according to their Prakriti or their nature, those who worship whomsoever they feel like, how do they worship? So Krishna answers him and says that your faith can be sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic when you do not take guidance of the Shastra. The Shastra helps you to become situated on the platform of the soul. But if you do not follow the scripture, like the Bhagavad Gita, and you follow your own whim and fancy and form of worship, then you will worship according to your own whim and fancy. And Krishna points out, Yajante Satvika Devan Yaksha Rakshamsi Rajasah Pretan Bhuta Ganauschanye Yajante Tamasa Janaha. So those who are in Sattvic Guna, who are identified with Prakriti, they worship various devtas. And what happens to those who worship devtas? Yanti deva vrata devan pitran virvanti pitravrata bhutani yanti bhute jya yanti madhyajno apimam. Abrahama bhuvana loka punaravartino archana mama pete sukham punarjanmana vidyate. So those who worship other devtas, right from Brahmalok downwards, they go to those planets, having exhausted their pious credits, they come back again into this world. So those who worship the devtas, they go to the abode of the devtas. Those who worship their pitris, their ancestors, they go to the abode of the ancestors. Those who worship the ghosts and spirits go to the abode of the ghosts and spirits. And Krishna says, those who worship me come to me. And of course, from all the other abodes, you will come back. But those who come to Krishna, they never return. This is very clearly declared in Bhagavad Gita. Yaksharakshamshi Rajasaha. So those who are in Rajaguna, they are born in families of Yakshas and Rakshasas. They are born in families where there is absolutely lust for life, where there is attachment to the world and worldly things, where the ego is predominant and the aggrandizement of their ego is the primary function of their life. And those who are primarily in Tamagun and identify with that Tamagun, who do they worship? They worship ghosts and spirits. They go to following all kinds of dreadful ghouls and demons. And by worshipping them, they ultimately attain those ghouls. In fact, even those who in fact perform tapasya, if they are performing it out of pride and egoism and lust and attachment, they're impelled by passion, they torture their bodily organs, they are the demons. Ashastra vihitam ghoram tapyante ye tapo janah damba ahankara samyukta kama raga balanvitah karsyanta sharirastam bhuta gramam chetasa mama chaivanta sharirastam tan vidya asura nishchayan. So all the time you see various people who are performing great tapasyas in order to gain name and fame. They fast for weeks on end, months on end. And what is worse, they encourage their children also to fast. And these helpless, hopeless children, having such dreadful parents, to please their parents who want name and fame and their name in the papers, who celebrate their weeks of fasting with huge public functions, even make their children fast unto death. If you follow the newspapers, you will come to know that there are people who make their own children fast unto death. So this, Krishna says, is those who ashastra vihitam ghoram, those people who are following kinds of austerities not mentioned in the scriptures. They torture their bodily organs. Krishna, of course, points out that this path is not meant for people who eat too much or eat too little, for those who sleep too much or sleep too little, but for those who are moderate in their eating, sleeping, and recreation. They can mitigate all suffering by following this system of yoga. So the gunas also influence you to engage in all kinds of austerities which are harmful to you and those around you. So the gunas also influence the foods that you eat. And the foods that you eat influence the gunas that overpower you. And the Bhagavad Gita clearly points out that Ayu Sattva Bal Arogya Sukha Priti Vivardhana Rasya Snigdha Sthira Hridaya Ahara Satvika Priya. So when you are in Sattvagun, you are naturally attracted to foods that are in Sattvagun because your Prakriti is attracted to other Prakriti similar to it. And by eating foods that are sattvic, you also acquire more sattvic characteristics. So these foods purify one's existence. They give you strength and health and happiness and satisfaction. These foods are in fact fresh, juicy, palatable. Whereas foods that are coming from Rajagun, which are attractive to people who are in Rajagun, are Katva Amla Lavanya iti Ushna Tiksha Ruksha Vidhadinaha Ahara Rajasyesta. So these foods which are too sour, too salty, too pungent, too dry, too hot, too bitter, they are liked by people who are in Rajaguna. And Krishna says, these are foods that cause pain, distress, and disease. I had a classmate who loved to eat spicy food. And he loved to eat spicy food to such an extent that when he would eat in a restaurant with us, for example, a Chinese restaurant, he would keep on putting chili sauce in it. Not just the green chili sauce, but also the red chili sauce. And he said, I cannot enjoy food unless at the end of the food, I experience complete perspiration from head to foot. Of course, this was very long ago. Since then, he has gone through a life where indubitably he has experienced pain and distress. And he suffered from gastrointestinal cancer as well, for which he was successfully operated. So that food, Krishna says, Yata yamam gata rasam puti paryushitam cha yat uchishtam apicha medyam bhojanam tamasa priyam. So food that is stale and putrid and decomposed and unclean, such is food that is liked by people who are in Tamagun. And such food also increases Tamagun within you. So the decomposed foods, the fermented foods, alcohol, highly spiced pickles, all these are liked by people who are in Tamagun. So Krishna explains that when you perform yajna, see yajna, tapaha and dana, these are the three medicines which are prescribed for our salvation. Yajna, which is sacrifice, helps us to go beyond ourselves, to think beyond ourselves. Whomsoever you are performing that sacrifice for, ideally it is performed for the Supreme Lord. But that sacrifice is also performed for the gods. It is performed for the ancestors. It is performed for something other than self. And the performance of sacrifice is to help you to become less self-centered. Which of course I have been always telling you, remember God, forget self. Similarly, dana is the means by which we give instead of taking. And we counter this, just like sacrifice counters the attitude of being self-centered, which comes naturally to Prakriti. We also learn to give, which is opposed to the grabbing tendency that comes naturally to most of us. And similarly, tapasya is the means by which we restrain ourselves from enjoyment. And by restraining ourselves from enjoyment, we control our senses. So yajna, dana, tapa, they help us to overcome the desires to be self-centered or egotistical or egoistical. It helps us to overcome the attitude of wanting to control and possess as many things as possible. And also the desire to enjoy, which indeed we overcome when we give in charity. So Krishna points out that austerity of the body is when we worship God, the priests, the spiritual teachers, superiors like our parents and elders. By keeping clean, keeping your body clean, being simple, observing brahmacharya appropriately, and non-violence, these are tapasya of the body. Similarly, austerity of speech, which I have covered earlier, is that we must speak the truth, the pleasant truth, and that truth which is beneficial. We should never speak anything that offends anybody. And do not push your ego in your speech. Rather, give reference to the scripture or to other authorities. Similarly, to be serene, to be simple, to have self-control and silence of the mind, these are the tapasyas of the mind. So when you observe tapasya of the body, tapasya of speech, and tapasya of mind to please God, then this is of the nature of sattva guna. So the rest I have covered earlier, but I would like now to move on to the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna clearly discusses how we should behave in sattva guna. Because behaving in sattva guna, we make it easy for ourselves to transcend the gunas. So Krishna points out that we should never give up our duties. And if you give up your duties out of illusion, then this renunciation that you perform is nothing but tamasic renunciation. Niyatasya tu sannyasaha karmano nopapadyayate mohat tasya parityagas tamasa parikirtitah. Your duty should never be given up. If out of illusion you give up your duties, then giving up these duties is in tamagun. This renunciation is in tamagun. Anyone who gives up his duties because it is a troublesome duty, because he's giving up the duty out of fear, such a person is in rajagun. And this never leads to any form of elevation. Dukkham itya eva yat karma kaya klesha bhayatyajit sakritva rajasam tyagam naiva tyaga phalam labet. So, very clearly Krishna points out of fear, out of finding it uncomfortable, never give up your duty. But he who performs his prescribed duties only because it ought to be done, who renounces all attachment to the fruit, his renunciation is in sattva guna. So those who are in sattva guna, they neither hate inauspicious work, nor are they attached to auspicious work. They have no doubt about work. So very often you find that there is work that you have to do, perhaps in your job, perhaps as a duty to your family, perhaps as a duty to society. And these duties are troublesome or they are fearful. And if you give it up, then what are you doing? You are doing it in Rajagun. You will never attain the higher goal of transcending the gunas. But if you perform the duties that you have to perform, including the duties that come in your job and your work, whether you like them or you do not like them, whether they appear good to you or they appear bad to you, you have to perform those duties because they are the duties allocated to you by the will of God. And therefore, you perform them without attachment to them. You will be then situated in Sattva. So it is impossible for anyone to give up your activities or duties without achieving dire ends. Therefore, Krishna says that he who renounces the fruits of his action is one who is truly renounced. Now, those who are not renounced, that is, who are acting for themselves, the fruits of action, which are desirable, undesirable, and mixed, they will get these fruits after death. But those who have performed actions with the attitude of renunciation, and this attitude of renunciation they're doing simply because it is their duty, they have no such results to suffer or enjoy. This is very interesting, and you should, there is a, many people argue with this, that how can you do duties which are not good for you, which are inauspicious, which are harmful. But if you do those duties without any sense of self, you will be protected. So once somebody said that what about people who worked for Hitler? They said that their activities were done only out of duty. The famous statement, Befehl est Befehl. Duties are duties, orders are orders, and I fulfilled those orders. So all the dreadful things they did, were they not entitled to punishment? I would invite all of you to see the movie if you can get it. And this movie is called Trial at Nuremberg. It's a trial of those people who worked for Hitler and who are in fact tried at Nuremberg. And you can see the serenity in their faces when they said, we did it because we were ordered. So mentally they were at peace. And eventually at the end of the movie, you see that almost all of them, or all of them, they are let off. So it's important to understand that the duties you perform in a renounced state of mind, not seeking any fruits, not considering yourself to be the doer, it doesn't matter what actions you are performing, one is free from sin. It's interesting to note that Bhishma Dev, he knew he was on the wrong side. He knew he was on the wrong side. He knew he was fighting with God. And I gave this example when many, many years ago, an Indian Air Force pilot came to see me. And he approached me at the end of my lectures. And he said, are you the person who spoke on karma? I've got your audio cassette. I said, yes. So he said, I am a pilot who is situated in an underground airbase on the borders of our Pakistan. And my duty is that when I am commanded, I will fly over Pakistan and I will drop an atomic bomb. So if I am going to drop an atomic bomb, then I will kill so many people. Won't I suffer the karma of all that? So I said, you are asking me the same question that Arjuna asked Krishna. Because Krishna had to speak the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna because Arjuna felt that if I participate in this battlefield at Kurukshetra, I will incur so much sin. That is the whole point on which Krishna debated with Arjun and convinced him otherwise. So the pilot told me that, hey, that was God speaking to Arjun, and God gave him the order to fight the war. But I am a person who will be told to drop the bomb by whom? I will be told to drop the bomb by a prime minister who has apparently taken a suitcase worth 1 crore of rupees, a corrupt man. It was that time. So I looked at him and I said, my dear friend, if you feel that you are not suitable for your duties, kindly resign from your commission and leave the armed forces. That's what you're saying, isn't it? But on the other hand, please try to understand that if you are performing your actions in a spirit of sacrifice and devotion to God, and these duties that have been given to you in the performance of your command, in under which God has placed you, because nothing happens in the world without God's consent. Even then, I give you the example of Bhishma. Bhishma knew Krishna was God. Bhishma, despite knowing Krishna was God, despite knowing the Pandavas were right, despite knowing that Kauravas are wrong, as a result of the oath that he had taken, he remained on the side of the Kauravas. And even though he knew Krishna was God, he picked up his sword and went to fight Krishna. He went to attack God. All the while fighting an army when he knew that he was on the wrong side. But he acted without thinking himself to be the doer. He acted in a spirit of sacrifice and devotion to God, even as he attacked him. And what happened to him? While all the other people who died on the battlefield of Kurukshetra went to heaven, hell, etc., you find in the Mahabharata that while Bhishma died on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, his soul left his body and directly entered into Krishna, directly entered into God. So if you are renounced in your activity, if you are performing your activity with the attitude of Om Tat Sat, if you understand that you are not the doer and Prakriti is the doer, if you understand very clearly that indeed you aspire for no fruits of the action that you are performing, if you are truly renounced in what you are doing, then you neither get the benefits nor do you get the blame. Many years ago, we were part of a team where a group of young, devotionally inclined ophthalmologists were going and doing cataract operation in the villages. So many people came and said, why are you doing that? If even one guy gets infected, all these villagers will jump on you and murder you. You will be beaten up. So I told them that, look here, we go there to act for God. We put up no banner that we come from this organization or that organization. We start with having bhajan, kirtan, and we give them in their own language lectures on Bhagavad Gita. And we perform these actions we perform the surgeries with the greatest of precautions, with the most sterile surroundings. And we make it absolutely above board. When the bandage is removed from the eyes of the person whose cataract is operated, the bandage is removed in front of the deity of God in the temple of the village, so that the first thing they see is God. We don't think we are the doers. We don't claim the credit. These activities are performed in renunciation. All the good goes to God. And if God wishes and some problem occurs, that will also go to God. So Krishna clearly points out that you have to perform all actions in a spirit of renunciation. You have to perform all actions without considering yourself to be the doer. You have to perform actions without, in fact, aspiring for the fruits of those actions. Your knowledge should also be sattvic, because sattvic knowledge sees an undivided spiritual nature in all existence. It sees undivided in the divided. This is knowledge in the mode of goodness. Whereas those who see different living entities and different individuals, they are in the mode of passion. And those whose knowledge makes them do something blindly, without knowledge of truth, without leaving it obstinately, they are people whose knowledge is in the mode of darkness. So therefore, all of us must aspire to transcend the gunas. But even while we aspire to transcend the gunas, as long as the gunas are operative, and as long as we tend to identify with the gunas, we should encourage the presence of sattva gun. Because when you are encouraging sattva gun, what will happen is that you will have the opportunity to transcend the gunas, because you will see through that sattvic knowledge that everything is undivided, it's part of one whole, that Vasudhaiva Kutumbikam, that this is whole world is one family and we're all part of one. And you will also see that you are simply an instrument, a cog in the wheel. And indeed, you do nothing, God does everything. And not only does God do everything, but you should not aspire for the fruits of your action. You should not consider yourself to be the doer. I think I'll conclude here. There is more, but I would like to stop here for now, to give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you might have.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So the first question that we have is, how do we, as human beings, balance all our gunas?
I've already discussed this last time, that your body balances gunas physiologically. When you use that part of the day where your body is in the right physiological frame, you are balancing gunas. For example, if you sleep at sunset, then what will happen? You will get up 2 hours before sunrise. You will automatically be in sattva gun. And this will give you an opportunity to pray, to chant, to worship, to perform yogasana. And thus you will set your mind, you will set your mood, you will set your physiology for having a strong streak of sattva through the day. When you are in Rajagun through the rest of the day, you will act in Rajagun. And by evening, when you are tired and you're sleepy, by sunset, you'll go to sleep. But if you get up late, if you do not spend any time in creating harmony through prayer and chanting and worship, and in fact, you sleep late because you are Raat ka Raja or Raat ki Rani, and you want to enjoy and drink and party in the night, well, you will be creating an imbalance. Therefore, follow the system of nature. Follow the system of sunrise and sunset. Follow the system of the world which is manifesting through nature around you, and your gunas will naturally be in balance.
We have a question from a Zoom audience. I'll just ask it. If God does everything, then can anyone be blamed or take the punishment for one's action or misdeeds?
You get punishment for your misdeeds when you think that you have done it. When you act out of a sense of ego, when you act out of a sense of doership, you get the punishment. Whenever you act with the spirit of I, me, and myself, you experience the law of karma. When you act in a spirit of the divine, understanding you are an instrument and you are not the doer, then you are free from karma. This has been covered in my lecture on karma. Please see that series of, I think, 3 lectures or more on karma.
Okay. I think these were the 2 questions that we had this week. Before we close the session, I'd like to just remind our audience that please write in with your suggestions on what Dr. Nagarkatti should cover next. And of course, we will be picking up those topics in the coming weeks. And Dr. Shantanu, will you be continuing with the Prakriti and the Gunas next week, or will it be new?
Let's see what we get as suggestions.
Okay. So please
Hari
write in
Om,
with your
Jai Shri
suggestions.
Krishna,
Thank you.
Jai Shri
Hari Om.
Krishna.
Thank you.